two dueling ribbons. Friends, before we begin the service in Carole's memory, each of her daughters has a black ribbon which we pin to your clothing. When I tear the ribbons, they will symbolize the torn heart that you have inside because of your mother's passing. Before we tear the ribbon, I'll ask you to recite a blessing. We'll do it in Hebrew and in English. And the blessing thanks God for your mother's life, despite the sadness we feel today because of her death. So just the two of you would repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. And now the English. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, creator of life, and true judge. And we all say together, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, and please place them on silent. Thank you.
Friends, with this affirmation, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, blessed be the judge of truth on our lips, and with sorrow in our hearts, we come together this morning to remember Carole with love and to bring her family comfort and support by our very presence. We're going to begin the service today with a selection from the book of Psalms. Psalm 121 is a prayer in which we ask God to guard our souls in our going out and in our coming in. And we recite it today as a prayer that God will guard Carole's soul now that she has gone out of our presence and come into God's eternal presence. I'm going to chant a few of the original verses in Hebrew, and then I'll read a version of the psalm in English. Shir la'malot, esa einai ele harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz, al yitei lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha, hine lo yanum velo yishan, shomer Yisrael. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, creator of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot be moved. Your guardian never slumbers. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord will be your protector. The Lord will give you shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil and preserve your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever. The 23rd Psalm expresses our conviction that even when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we are never alone, that God is always with us and gives us support, strength, and courage equal to our needs. So if you are familiar with the words of the 23rd Psalm, I invite you to join me in reciting it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We often imagine life to be a journey, a pilgrimage, and one of the most beautiful expressions of what it is to have a journey through life that I know is a poem by Alvin I. Fine called Birth is a Beginning. And it speaks about how our life is from the moment we're born to the moment we pass away, and all of the different stages in between. So I'd like to share with you this poem by Alvin Fine, Birth is a Beginning. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing, from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity, and youth to age. From innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing. From foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith. From defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not in some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. And today we've come to celebrate the sacred journey, the sacred pilgrimage of Carole Krassner through life, and to begin our reflections on the quality of her life and how much she meant to everyone here today, and especially to her family and friends. There are three members of the community who are going to be sharing their thoughts with us today. First, Donna Gibson. Second, Michael Dodick. And finally, a nephew, Gary Sterling. So Donna will come up first, then Michael, and then Gary. Donna, if you would come up.
Once upon a time, back in 1960, I had a next-door neighbor, Carole Krassner, who could make all things beautiful, inside her house and out. Inside, she used contact paper everywhere to refinish furniture, walls, on the back of the slats of vertical blinds, etc., etc. She could spread color, style, and design in a cost-effective way throughout. The results were amazing. Clearly, she would have earned the Contact Paper Design Award had there been one. And when she wasn't working with contact paper, she was working with fabric at her sewing machine under the staircase, creating draperies or dresses. Deborah is wearing a dress Carole made today. Back then, the outside of Carole's house was made pretty too. She had carefully placed a 12-inch white picket fence in the ground, which lined our family's shared walkway leading up to our front doors. The Krassner's front yard looked perfect until a 5-year-old in the neighborhood, while learning to ride her bike without training wheels, fell onto the white fence, breaking the pickets and crushing the flowers. I know this story to be true because that 5-year-old was me. I recall picking up the bike and myself, leaving the broken fence and the flattened flowers behind, and running in tears to my mother to make a confession about the accident. Mom said that I had to knock on Carole's door and tell her what happened. She would come along too. So tearfully, I reported the incident to Carole. Carole said nothing, grabbed a trash bag, headed outside to the accident scene. She pulled the fence out of the ground and said, "I never liked that fence anyway." "Cheap trash," she said, and she threw it in the bag. Meanwhile, my mother asked Carole if she could pay money for that fence, replace it. And Carole turned and said, "Why would you give me money for trash?" And that was the end of that. The crisis resolved, and I did not appear to be in any trouble. I'm not sure, but perhaps it was at that time I said to myself, I could be lifelong friends with this neighbor lady. It was a friendship that was defined more by longevity over 60 plus years rather than the pleasure of frequent visits. It's safe to say that in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, our families were close in a physical way as we shared a common front steps to the entrances of our homes. In the last 40 years, while living in different locations, we remain emotionally connected by choice and affection. Having journeyed together through life's celebrations and tragedies and all the ups and downs that occur in between. But in the morning of the early years, my family could stand at the bottom of our staircase near the common wall that was shared with the Krassner's home, and we could easily hear Carole's wake-up call to her son, Jeff. It started with a pleasant call, and then got progressively louder and more impatient. "Jeff, time to wake up. Jeff, get out of bed. Jeffrey, wake up!" And with such an amazing force that my family members marveled at the strength of Carole's roar from such a little person. Eileen says that her mother could sometimes be tough, a parent who would frequently offer direct guidance and demand obedience. For example, cleaning chores had to be done to perfection before Eileen was permitted to visit friends. But Carole's roar reportedly got softer over the years when she talked to her great-granddaughters, Mallory and Addison. And then the roar turned to a gentle purr in the presence of her very lovable new great-grandson, Jeffy. By contrast, my relationship with Carole was very different than as a parent. If I was asked to define Carole, I would elect 3 personal characteristics to describe her. And the first would be that Carole showed up for people. After my father died suddenly, I recall how Carole called my mother regularly to check in. It was never a long chat, but it always felt like a caring one. Sort of a phone hug, if there is such a thing. And I remember as a nosy kid from next door that Carole cared for her very sick mother-in-law in their home during her last days, an unusual kind of care that left a lasting impression on me when I was young. During a visit to Carole's home years ago, I remember discussing her attendance at the chair exercise classes and viewing the library movies, the list that hung on her refrigerator. I asked her if she went to library films that didn't interest her, and she responded, "Of course I do. It's not just about the movie. It's about the people who go to the movies, too." Of course. When we lunched together just before the start of this pandemic, Carole gave me a report on her recent contacts with folks from the old neighborhood, as she had remained in contact with them too. And she described with pleasure the current friends that had gathered for meals under the fabulous group named the Roses. The last time Carole and I were together, she asked me to drive by the mailbox at the end of her street to drop some cards in the box. I remember this because Carole's mailbox has a little narrow slit, not the mailbox that opens wide that I was used to. And there I stood with a pile of cards, inserting one at a time. Carole, I asked, how many friends do you have? So many letters. Deb and Eileen told me that Carole did send cards regularly, but it was also likely that some of those envelopes were donations she liked to give too. I can speak for myself that I received a card in the mail from Carole 2 weeks ago. It must have been mailed on the day she was hospitalized. I also had a phone message from her last month after she received an amaryllis bulb that I had sent her in the mail. She fussed over the beauty of the expected flower, and now I look back and I wonder if I was trying to replace the flowers I flattened 16 years ago. Or maybe I sent Carole that flower because she sent flowers to my sister after her knee surgery last year. But here's what I know for sure. Carole complained that her ears didn't work. That's probably true. But clearly there was nothing wrong with her thoughtful mind and her very caring heart. Secondly, I'll remember Carole for her strength and her resilience. Some worry that Carole's change in her marital and financial status after 34 years as a couple would cause her to collapse, but not so. She decorated and enjoyed a new home in Cinnaminson, and years later went on to move to Mount Laurel neighborhood, where she developed lots of wonderful friendships and enjoyed a variety of activities. When cancer hit and Carole's bladder had to be removed, she took it in stride, and she made the nurses laugh when she named her new post-op abdominostoma Stella. And I remember the devastation when Carole lost her only son, Jeffrey. During the first year after the loss, she would tell me that she pretended that Jeff was away on vacation, and she told herself that he would be back soon. Sort of fake it till you make it approach. Then later on, she told me when she was feeling sad, she would dress up in a pretty outfit and go for a walk at the mall, because that's what Jeffrey would tell her to do. More recently, she explained that she felt that Jeff got to do what he wanted to do in life, and that made her happy to remember him that way. Carole loved to dance. It may be safe to say that when she hit a bump in the road, she was able to figure out the way to jitterbug around it with some fancy footwork and a good sense of humor to carry her forward and beyond. And lastly, I'll remember Carole for her healthy eating and socialization routines. She ate 3 meals a day, no matter what. She had a cup of milk at lunch and a sandwich or salad, followed by just 2 Chip Ahoy cookies or just 1 chocolate tasty cake cupcake. In the later years, she had a 1-hour-long afternoon nap. Her dinner included protein and always a green vegetable or salad. She finished the day with a scoop of ice cream or milkshake, no snacks in between. Maybe that's why she never weighed more than 110 pounds. Evenings after dinner included viewing TV crime shows like Matlock, The Blue Bugs, or voracious reading of her romance novels. Cleaning and scrubbing were always on Sunday and Monday. The hired cleaning help was trialed, but later deemed unnecessary due to their inability to meet Carole's required cleaning standards. And most importantly, I'll remember Carole's daily routine around the connections she had with those she loved the most. Her 30-year committed friendship with her partner, Marty, that included many dinners and movies, and in recent years, a daily phone call at 5:30 p.m. She would say to the others, I have to get off the phone now because Marty will be calling. And there were also multiple daily phone calls from Eileen and daily calls from Deb each afternoon. Every Tuesday night, dinners prepared and hosted by Carole for the extended family members. Oh, how she embraced and loved the entire clan. The kids, the grandkids, the great-grandkids, and all the significant others that came along to gather at their weekly meals. It is said that Carole was most proud that her kids were close. She would say, I must have done something right. It was her own measure as a matriarch. When we were last together, Carole told me, I had a wonderful life. I got to do everything I wanted to do. No regrets. I wish that for everyone. I know that Carole's family and friends will miss her, but my sense is that she'll keep coming back to us. I think it's not possible to extinguish from our minds what Deborah described as an 89-year-old Spitfire, 4'10", down to 4'8" at the finish line. As Eileen remarked, she was still living independently, still driving and enjoying life in her final days, just as she would have wanted to finish up. I hear Carole in my head now, remember her with a smile. She was a demonstration for me on how to live a long and happy life. She left us the recipe. Stay logged in to the connected mode. Send a letter, make a phone call, accept what comes and move on to do what you want. When life gets hard, fake it until you make it. Or get dressed up and go for a walk. Drink milk at lunch, eat your green vegetables, finish the day with one scoop of ice cream, don't overindulge. Lose yourself in a good book or watch a whodunit crime show. Donate. Check in with somebody who might be having a harder time than you. And most of all, stay close and care for those you love. Carole might say the best way to honor her is to live life well without her. And if you don't do that, I predict you'll see for yourself that although Carole's physical body may be gone, she will still be able to rise up and roar in your heads and in your heart.
That's a tough act to follow. That was beautiful. Last week, Sherry told me that Carole's not doing too well. It went in one ear and out the other because nothing could hurt Carole. Carole seemed always to be so positive. And anyway, she's going to outlive all this. Then a few days ago, I awakened to hear Sherry on the phone and hearing the words, when did she pass? And I got this frog in my throat, this knot in my stomach, and I just laid there. The first time I remember meeting Carole was so long ago when my friend Gary had something to drop off at her house. At that time, the Krassners were still living in Philly. They always mentioned near Aunt Carole and how sweet she was. And of course, we ended up staying for dinner because there was always room for two more. Fast forward a few years, and I started dating Sherry. And by that time, the Krassners had already moved to New Jersey. And we went out many times. We would end up stopping by Carole's to visit Eileen. And seeing Carole again in those times only strengthened That's for sure in those days, as well as today. Eileen was a friend. And if Eileen was friend number one, Carole was just behind, was friend number 1A. So the years went by, and we spent many joyous times together with our growing families. And we have become her family. We began celebrating holiday dinners together as often as possible. And even though it wasn't a holiday, even 2 weeks ago we celebrated Carole's birthday, and the week before Eileen's birthday. After our dinner, there was a lot of cleanup. And I'm not sure how it came about, but I would find myself left at the table with Carole and we would talk. I know no one would have let Carole clean up. And I'm not sure if I was just lazy and helping, or maybe that was just the plan. But for me it was good because it gave me the opportunity to bond with her. We would talk about her past. We would talk about the movies she saw at the library, and going out to lunch with her friends, and she was disappointed because for a long time COVID interrupted all that. She would tell me about her daily routine of waking up, eating breakfast, then cleaning, then lunch, then watching TV, whether it was Law and Order or Matlock, then reading and taking her nap. Doesn't sound like much, but to her it was what she really liked. She would always ask me about Neil and Lee and their families, and a lot of times even asked me about my sister. She was always very thoughtful. The last few days in spending time with Eileen and Debbie, my heart goes out to you because I know how difficult these times are, and at the same time, you lose an honor and friend. And for Carole's partner Marty, Don, Monica, and John, Scott, and Kelsey, Mallory, Addie, and baby Jeffrey, my deepest sympathies to you, and also to everyone here, because we lost someone very special. This is sort of a repeat, but in finishing, Carole has told me and Sherry on more than one occasion that she doesn't know what she did to be so lucky. She has an amazing family. She wants for nothing. She did everything in this life she wanted to do. And if you knew her, especially if you knew her well, she did her way.
Hi, I am Gary, the nephew. I think I know Aunt Carole longer than anyone else here. It's been 69 years. Deborah and Eileen called yesterday and asked if I wanted to speak, and I said no. I really didn't want to do this. But I thought, you know what? She was by far my favorite relative. Sorry, Deborah. Sorry, Eileen. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady. And I thought I at least owed it to her. I really am quite fortunate to call her aunt. When I was younger, and Aunt Carole, I'm not sure she ever reached 4'10". She, 4'7", 4'8", maybe. I used to call her Will because of her tremendous size. And she laughed every time I did it, but that was my nickname for her, and she appreciated it very much. She was the matriarch of our family. My mom, her sister, passed away when she was 61 years old, and her mom, my grandmother, their grandmother, passed away 2 months later. So it really left the family to be held together by someone, and Aunt Carole stepped forward and was that person. So we are, I will say, as odd as a family as we are extremely, extremely close. The cousins are really close, and I've traveled, Rona and I have traveled and lived in, I don't know how many homes and how many cities, but my aunt found a way to get to every one of them across the country. And I will never forget that. As the matriarch of the family, she treated my family, my extended family, my wife, like a daughter. She really did. She actually preferred not to talk to me, but would call us every couple weeks and ask to talk to Rona. She had little interest for me. She treated Stacy like a granddaughter, and I know my daughter just thought the world of her. On a brighter side, just a couple of stories. I could probably talk for hours upon hours, but I found it ironic as we pulled up in front of the funeral home that across the street is a golf course. Well, few of you know this, but my aunt, after her divorce, tried to do some things that she had never done before. So she took golf lessons. And she went and she, after a period of time, after taking those lessons, she decided that she was ready, so she called me. And I was pleasantly surprised. I'm a golfer. And I said, you know what? Next time in Philadelphia, we will play together. Big mistake. So I come in, I bring my golf clubs in. Rona was in with me. And Deborah had a male friend at the time, Dino. He was a loser, Deborah. I'm glad you got rid of him. And Dino, Aunt Carole, and I went on a golfing expedition. I said, listen, telling Rona, I said, we will only play 9 holes so we can get home at a reasonable time. 9 holes takes about 2 hours. We get to the golf course, Aunt Carole, first tee, hits it about 15 feet. Hits her second shot, maybe 20, and then her third shot. But by the time she got to her 10th shot, I said, I think you should pick up the ball and we should put it on the green. Dino, he was worse than that. So I hit on, and I let the next group that was behind us play through. I think I did that 25 times. I saw every single foursome that was playing that day on that course. So we get home, and it was 5 hours later. And Rona said, I thought you were only going to play 9 holes. My comment was, we did. It was the worst. She gave up golf, I must say. She had better things to do. She was a much better seamstress than she was a golfer. I was really fortunate. My wife and I, and many times our daughter, traveled the world. We go overseas often. We started going with Aunt Carole so that she could be a partner for Stacy. They would have a room, and we literally traveled the world together. We went to Asia, we went to Europe, we went to the United States. She loved it, and it was really special for us to be able to go with Aunt Carole all over the world. My aunt will be missed. She had a wonderful journey, and I think everyone here knows that. She was the most upbeat, positive. She was a spitfire. I remember her yelling at Jeffrey to get up. I used to sleep at their house often, so I was treated just like Jeffrey. Or as Vince Lombardi would say, she treated everyone equal, like dirt. But no, she was really great, but boy, was she tough. So I'm just going to end it and say I'm really a lucky guy to be related to Aunt Carole. She will never be forgotten, and she really is the best. So we love you. Rest in peace. That took me 2 minutes to run. Your speech was awesome. Mine was a nothing.
You left us laughing. This has been a wonderful set of tributes to Carole's memory, and we want to thank Donna, Michael, and Gary for sharing so many wonderful memories, for sharing some laughter with us, and also occasionally a tear and a choke back sense of loss. It is never easy to say farewell to someone whom we love. And what special memories you all have shared that have encompassed so many special parts of Carole's life. We want to especially extend our profound sympathy to Eileen and Deborah on the loss of their mother. It was 5.5 years ago that we were here together with your mother to mark Jeffrey's unexpected passing and to celebrate his life. And Don, I know, was one of the speakers then as well. We were heartbroken at his loss, and now again, there is a sadness that overwhelms us, even in the midst of remembering Carole's life with such affection and such a wonderful sense of appreciation for its length and for its goodness. One of the things that strikes me is actually two of the things that every person commented on was her size, that she was barely 4'10" at her best, maybe less, according to Gary. And as we all know, we all get a little bit shorter as we get older. The older we get, the shorter we get. And so she lost a few inches as she got along. But she never lost her spunk. She never lost being a spitfire. She never lost being a real dynamo. And when I was talking to Eileen and Deborah the other day, they said that her great-granddaughter Addison used to say, she's very little, but very bossy. So she got in the, she was the matriarch. She was entitled to be bossy because that's part of what matriarchs do. She was a wonderful and loving mother to Eileen, to Deborah, and of course to Jeffrey, a blessed memory. And she was always there for you. And the quintessential homemaker, she had a beautiful home, thanks to the white picket fence and contact paper. And also the chores that she made you do. You all, every Saturday morning, you had to get your chores done. You had inspection. You had to make sure that it was done exactly right, because that was part of the way that she kept the house as immaculate and as beautiful as it was. She didn't play favorites, at least in her mind. She believed that she treated all three of you equally. But then, of course, when she went downtown to spend the collections from her dime bank, she always came back with just one present. And she never knew in advance who she was going to buy the present for, but she would see something that struck her and say, well, this would be nice for Eileen, this would be nice for Deborah, this would be nice for Jeffrey. And she would bring it back, and you'd wait, wondering who's going to get the present when she comes back from town on her little shopping trip. What a wonderful blessing. The scripture tells us that that the crown of the older generation is their grandchildren. And Mama really loved her grandchildren. Scott and Kelsey, Monica and John, and the great-grandchildren Mallory, Addison, and as she used to say, my little Jeffrey, just 5 months old, bearing the name of her wonderful son, whom she loved so much. And just as Jeff used to call her every Thursday night at 7, Scott took over that tradition and faithfully has called her every Thursday night, and at 7 o'clock,
just to check in and see how Mom was doing. Marty was such a wonderful part of her life for 30 years. Their life together, they traveled together, their companionship to each other, and she was so grateful to his daughter Florence and her husband Paul when they would bring him out to see her from Symphony House. Carole was born in Brooklyn, and then as a child moved to the Philadelphia area. We want to acknowledge her parents, Samuel and Minnie Kotler of blessed memory, and also her older sister Renee, Gary's mom and Mitchell's mom, and the love that all of them shared with one another. She grew up in the Strawberry Mansion section of Philadelphia and graduated Simon Gratz High School. She was a great cook and loved to host family gatherings, and as I understand it, her brisket was the star of the table, always something delightful to eat. She had a wonderful group of friends that she would meet monthly, the Roses. It was a women's lunch club, and they would get together, and they would be able to have lunch and talk. And she was still driving right up to the end, but that was a little where they met was a little bit out of her range. So she would drive to the dumpster at the Renaissance, and her friends Roz would pick her up and take her to the meeting. And then, of course, as was mentioned, she was a wonderful seamstress. She was part of a sewing circle, but the sewing circle probably did more talking than they did sewing. She was very fortunate, as several of you mentioned, that she felt she had a wonderful life. She felt very lucky that she must have done something right to have been blessed in the way she was. And probably the greatest blessing was that her children were so close to one another. I think every parent's hope is that their children will love each other just as they love them. And with the hopeful winding down of the COVID pandemic, even as it seems to have raised its ugly head again, she came on the idea that she wanted the family to take a trip. She wanted to all go together in Punta Cana, and she booked it for next August, 2022, fully expecting that she would be there with you. But she won't be there, but that gift is still there waiting for you. And she would want you to get on with life, to celebrate each other, to have new experiences, to make new memories, and to carry her with you in your heart always. I know that as life moves on, you will cherish her. Her heart, your memory will always be part of her heart, and her voice will always be in your head, reminding you to make life as beautiful, as meaningful, and as fulfilling as you possibly can. Tehi nishmata tzurora b'tzuror hachayim, may her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life, and let us say, Amen. Friends, if you are comfortable standing, I invite you to rise for the memorial prayer, the El Malay Racham. El Malay Rachamim Shochen Bamaromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tahorim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Chayke Bat Shmuel Umina Shehalacha Le'olama Began Eden Tehei Menuchata Ana Ba'al HaRachamim Hastireha B'Seiter Kenafecha Le'olamim Utzeror B'Tzeror Echayim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Carole Krassner, Chaike bat Shmuel Mina, who has gone to her eternity. Lord of mercy, we beseech you, remember all of the goodness and love that she brought to the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is her destiny. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Friends, please be seated. Following the service here in the chapel, we are going to be going out to Locustwood Cemetery, Locustwood Memorial Park, where there will be an entombment service for us all to participate in.